Hey, we're looking at podcast number 1 for chapter 6, which is on the integumentary system. Your integumentary system is basically the system of your skin, hair, nails, all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different jobs that your skin will do for you. Number 1 is protection, mainly protection from infections. You have a basically impenetrable covering throughout your entire body. And so you're going to be protected from anything getting in unless that barrier gets broken. Your integumentary system, your skin, also is going to help you with temperature maintenance by regulating how much heat you gain and lose. And that has to do with blood vessels and the ability to sweat. You also are able to make and store different nutrients, including vitamin D. When you're out in the sun, and you actually are able to make vitamin D, which will help you with calcium absorption in the future. Sensory reception to touch, pressure, pain, temperature, all of those kinds of things. You have sensory receptors all over your skin, all underneath your layers of skin to tell you what's going on with your body. And then we also can use your skin for excretion and secretion of salts, water, and organic waste. So your integumentary system is your skin, also called the cutaneous membrane. So basically it is a giant membrane covering your entire body. And it's made up of 3 main parts. You have the epidermis, the dermis, and then something called the hypodermis, which is the subcutaneous layer. So we're going to take a look at the structure of each of these layers in this podcast. So we're going to start with the epidermis. This is the outer layer of the skin. And so it's basically the layer of cells that is going to cover every surface of your body, internal and external, so both inside and out. And basically you have a non-living basement membrane, and from there up you have your epidermis, which is layers of skin. There's 2 types of epidermis. You have thick skin and you have thin skin. Thick layers, or thick skin is 5 layers. Okay, and this is where you would find this on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, places where you would have more contact, so you would need thicker skin. Thin skin is only 4 layers of epidermis, and that's found on the rest of your body, so thinner layers, easier to cut there, but you're less likely to have stress on those parts. And thick skin is also where you're most likely to get things like calluses and stuff, which is a buildup of the layers of dead skin that make up your epidermis. So let's take a look at what this is actually looking like. Your epidermis actually has no blood vessels in it. All of the nutrients that the cells of your epidermis need are going to come from the layer underneath, which is called the dermis. And all of those nutrients and water and everything that you need are going to move up into these cells by a process called diffusion. So that's where molecules move from high to low concentration. Within your epidermis, you have stem cells. These are going to make new cells, and they're going to divide, and they're going to move up through the layers of your skin, and they're going to replace dead cells as you move along. You also, in your epidermis, have your melanocytes. Melanocytes are going to make and store melanin, and melanin is your skin pigment. Your skin pigment is what is going to give you your color. Also within this layer you have skin receptors. So this is where you'll start to be able to feel temperature and pain and those kinds of things, the different sensations. Also within your epidermis you have a protein called keratin. Keratin is very durable, water resistant. It's what actually makes up your hair and nails, and it coats your skin. So that's why water does not actually soak completely into your skin. It can over time if you're soaking in the tub or something, but basically you have a pretty water resistant covering for your entire skin with these layer of dead cells. So a little more on keratin. Durable water resistant protein forms your hair, calluses, nails. So here's some extreme pictures of this. So this guy's got the giant mustache beard thing going. This lady's got the very long nails, but your hair and nails are made of keratin. And also the calluses that you can get like on your fingers if you work with your hands a lot. On your hands you can get kind of thicker skin in certain areas. Those are calluses, and they have a lot of keratin within them. Alright, so your skin actually gets replaced every 2 to 6 weeks depending on which part of your skin you're talking about. And the way that this happens is the cells that are in the lower layers down towards the bottom are going to do mitosis, so they're going to make copies of themselves. As they do that, they're going to move up the layers, the strata of the skin. So those ones move up. As they move away from the dermis, which is down at the bottom where they're getting all of their nutrients, they get less oxygen, less nutrients. And as they get further away from those oxygen and nutrients, they keratinize, which means they fill up with that protein keratin, and they die. They can stay part of your upper surface of your skin for probably another 2 weeks or so. And you actually have 15 to 30 layers of dead skin cells all along the top part of your skin. So the whole top part of your skin is basically dead cells. And every day you shed them or you wash them away. Most of the dust that's in the air is actually made of human skin cells that have washed away. But you're constantly replacing them, so they give you a good area of protection because they're mostly filled with keratin, which is that water-resistant protein, and then you have this really thick layer of them. Now, underneath your epidermis, you have your dermis. So this is basically the layer between the epidermis and the hypodermis. Has two layers. There's a top layer and a bottom layer. The top layer is the layer that's closest to the epidermis. That's the papillary layer. And then the reticular layer is deeper down. The purpose of your dermis is to support and nourish the epidermis. That is why it's there. So it's giving everything to that outer layer of skin cells that you have. Everything that layer needs is coming from the dermis. Also, it's going to allow for communication with other organ systems to the skin. So this is where a lot of your nerves and stuff are going to be found, is within this layer, so that they can go down to talk to your brain and spinal cord. So within your dermis, you have your blood vessels, you have lymph vessels, and you have your nerves. Hair follicles, so this is where the hairs on your arms and legs and all that kind of stuff grows from. Sweat glands are also contained within the dermis, and then also sebaceous glands. So we're going to talk more about these three things in the second podcast and what they do. Now, underneath your dermis, you have your subcutaneous layer, which is also called the hypodermis. Okay, and it's actually a layer of connective tissue. It's not actually part of the integumentary system. It's a stabilizing layer underneath, so it's actually a connective tissue, not an epithelial tissue. But your dermis is attached to it, and all the blood vessels and everything come up. So it's a very elastic tissue. It actually makes it the perfect spot for injections. So you can actually pinch your skin and it pinches up a little bit, and you can actually inject things right in there. But if you pinch your skin, you can kind of feel that it's kind of elastic. You can pull on it a little bit. Inside the subcutaneous layer, you have large blood vessels towards the top. Some of your hair follicles and some of your sweat glands go down that deep. And this is also where your layer of fat cells are found, is within this subcutaneous layer. We all have basically the same amount of fat cells, but the amount of fat that's in them is what is different, and that's how different people have different weights. But it's within that layer. So again, your subcutaneous layer, this hypodermis, is basically giving your dermis and epidermis a place to attach. So it's all one stable structure within your entire system. So if you think about your skin, it's 3 layers deep of lots and lots of cells and lots of other stuff within there. So you can take a look at this like in this picture. Down here at the bottom is your subcutaneous layer. Again, you have your larger blood vessels within here. These are your fat cells that would be in here. So you have some big arteries and veins. And then you get up into the dermis, which is this area in here. So your dermis has these different kinds of glands. So here's a sweat gland. Here you have a hair follicle, so you can see the hair coming out, and here's a sebaceous gland that is connected to it. You have smaller blood vessels within here. These are your little capillaries. They're going to be supplying the epidermis, which is this top layer up here, with the nutrients that they need. So here you have your melanocytes, so you get your skin color, that's your epidermis. And then here you have your thick layer of dead skin cells, basically. Also within here you have some touch and pain receptors. Here you have some temperature receptors. There's all different kinds of nerve receptors that are within your dermis as well. Okay. The last thing that we're going to talk about in here is how your skin is able to repair itself. So if you cut yourself to the point where you are bleeding, that means that you have cut down into the dermis layer. If you only have a superficial cut into the epidermis, you actually won't bleed because there's no blood vessels in the epidermis. So if you go deep enough where you're bleeding, you have cut into the dermis. Okay, so there's 4 stages to the healing process. Bleeding occurs at the injury site, and that blood is actually going to seal up the wound. It's also going to prevent microorganisms from coming in. So a little bit of blood flow is actually a good thing. Some white blood cells can get in there, but the blood flow out of the wound, so long as it's not gushing, is actually keeping bacteria and stuff from getting in. Once you've gotten the bleeding to stop, a scab will form. And basically what will happen is epithelial cells are going to come down and they're going to go and cover around the edges of the wound. And then white blood cells are going to come over and they're going to fight off infection. So sometimes at this point, if there is infection there, you can get pus that forms because the white blood cells will be attacking the bacteria and they'll get lots of them, and you actually can get that kind of white pussy stuff, which is mostly white blood cells mixed with the bacteria. Eventually, the scab is going to dissolve. It'll go away. The white blood cells will start to go away, and you will get scar tissue forming. The scar tissue can be temporary or it can be permanent, depending on how deep it goes. Eventually, the scab will be completely gone, and the scar tissue will be completely filled in, and you will have a healed wound. So let's just take a quick look at a picture of this. So here we are looking at stage 1. So here's your cut. Now, if you notice, you've gone in, so the epidermis is up in this layer. Your dermis is all the way down here. So here you have cut down and you've cut some of the blood vessels that are in the dermis. So you're bleeding. That blood is flowing, okay, and it's going to eventually fill up the entire cut, and your epidermis cells are going to migrate down. So they're going to cover the outer edges of the wound. And at the same time, white blood cells are going to come flowing in, okay? Over time, you will continue to get a thicker and thicker layer of those epidermis cells coming in here. And here you have your scab that has formed in there. So if you pick at the scab, you can actually, because it's still down into the dermis a little bit, you can cut open the blood vessels again. That's why scabs will bleed sometimes. So you want to try to leave them alone and let that process happen. And eventually you'll keep building up these cells until you have filled in the cut. And what you have in here is scar tissue. So you get extra keratin forming in there, and sometimes it can be discolored for a while. Sometimes that discoloration is permanent. But those are your stages of repair when you get a cut. So in the next podcast, we're going to take a look at what causes skin color and then at all of the different accessory organs.